Stop for a moment. Before you take another bite of food today, stay with me right here because what I'm about to tell you is something most people over 50 will never hear in a doctor's office. And yet, it may be one of the most powerful shifts you can make for your digestion, your energy, and your metabolism starting immediately before your very next meal. I've spent 24 years in surgical medicine. Over that time, I've seen thousands of patients walk in with the same quiet frustrations. Persistent bloating that never fully settles. A heavy feeling after meals that didn't exist 10 years ago. Cravings late at night that feel almost impossible to control. Energy crashes in the afternoon that seem to come out of nowhere. And almost every time, the root cause wasn't the food itself. It was something happening, or more accurately, something not happening in the seconds before the first bite. There is a 90-second ritual that can begin shifting this today. It costs nothing. It requires no special diet, no supplements, no gym membership. And the science behind it is solid, well-studied, and strangely overlooked in mainstream advice. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to explain why digestion slows after 50, what's actually changing inside your body, and how one small, deliberate act before eating can begin to reverse that trend. We're going to go deeper than most health videos ever do. We'll connect your nervous system, your gut bacteria, your stress hormones, and even the timing of your meals to one central issue. If bloating, sluggish digestion, low energy after eating, or unexplained cravings have been quietly wearing you down, you are exactly where you need to be. I'm Dr. Megan Foster. Let's get into this. The first concept you need to understand is something called the brain-gut connection. I'm not going to explain it in textbook language. I want you to feel it in your own body. Your digestive system is not just a tube where food drops into your stomach and gets broken down. It is a coordinated network involving your brain, your nervous system, and multiple organs working in a precise sequence. And here's the part most people never hear. That sequence is supposed to begin before food even touches your lips. Think about this. Have you ever smelled something cooking and suddenly your mouth filled with saliva? That wasn't random. That was your brain sending a preparation signal to your entire digestive tract. Your stomach begins producing acid. Your pancreas prepares digestive enzymes. Your small intestine gets ready to absorb nutrients. Your gallbladder prepares bile to break down fats. All of that begins simply because your brain detected that food was coming. This process is called the cephalic phase response. Cephalic means related to the head or brain. It is one of the most powerful drivers of healthy digestion, and it is widely underappreciated. Now, here's where things begin to shift after 50. That signal weakens, not because of age alone, but because of accumulated factors over decades. Chronic low-grade stress, eating quickly, eating while distracted, less time spent preparing or even smelling food, gradual changes in neurotransmitters, reduced sensitivity in the nerve that controls this entire response. That nerve is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in your body. It runs from your brainstem, through your neck, into your chest, and down into your abdomen. It connects your brain to your heart, lungs, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and liver. It is the main communication highway between your brain and your digestive organs. When your vagus nerve is active and responsive, digestion feels smooth and efficient. You eat, you feel satisfied, nutrients are absorbed properly, and food moves through at a steady pace. When it's underactive, everything slows down. Enzyme production drops. Stomach acid decreases. Food lingers longer than it should. Your gut bacteria environment shifts. You feel bloated, heavy, and tired. Your brain doesn't receive a strong "I'm full" signal, so you keep reaching for more. This isn't speculation. Research in gastroenterology and neurology consistently shows that weakened vagal tone is linked to slower gastric emptying, increased bloating, poorer blood sugar control, lower nutrient absorption, and stronger cravings. And after 50, 3 patterns make this worse. First, stress becomes chronic. Even if it's not dramatic, it's constant work, finances, family responsibilities, health concerns. Stress activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight branch. When that system is dominant, digestion is suppressed. Your body deprioritizes food processing when it thinks survival is the priority. Second, Decades of rushed eating reduce vagal stimulation. Meals in front of screens. Eating in the car. Finishing quickly. These habits slowly weaken the cephalic response. Third, hormonal shifts alter gut motility and bacterial balance, further disrupting communication between the gut and brain. The result? A system that is undersignaled and underprepared every time you sit down to eat. And here's where most people make the wrong move. They blame the food. They eliminate gluten, remove dairy, cut red meat, try supplements, add probiotics. Sometimes that helps temporarily, but it doesn't address the real issue. The problem isn't just what you're eating, it's whether your body is prepared to receive it, and that preparation begins in your nervous system before the first bite ever happens. Now let's go somewhere most health conversations never go your mouth. Not in a cosmetic sense, not in a dental sense, but as the command center of digestion. Your mouth is not just where food gets chewed into smaller pieces. It is the first and most powerful sensory gateway in your entire digestive process. The receptors in your tongue, palate, gums, and throat are constantly sending signals to your brain while you eat. Those signals are what activate the full digestive cascade. When you chew slowly and deliberately, several important processes begin at once. Salivary enzymes, especially amylase, start breaking down carbohydrates before they even reach your stomach. That early breakdown softens the blood sugar impact of starchy foods. At the same time, chewing stimulates the trigeminal nerve, one of your major cranial nerves, which communicates directly with brain centers that coordinate digestion. The longer and more intentionally you chew, the stronger that signal becomes. Research from major gastroenterology departments has shown that people who chew their food more thoroughly produce higher levels of satiety hormones after the exact same meal compared to people who eat quickly. They also demonstrate faster and healthier gastric emptying, meaning food moves through the stomach at a steady, efficient pace. And they show lower post-meal blood glucose spikes, which directly affects energy, cravings, and long-term metabolic stability. But here's something rarely discussed. The mechanical act of chewing is only part of the equation. The sensory intensity, the aroma, the flavor, the stimulation also matters. Certain substances, when chewed slowly and held in the mouth, create a far more powerful neurological response than plain food. They activate more receptors. They send stronger signals. They amplify what researchers call the cephalic phase response. And one of the most studied and surprisingly potent of these substances has likely been sitting in your spice cabinet for years. Before I reveal it, you need to understand something about timing. When food enters your stomach, your body has a complex job to do. The stomach must churn the food, mix it with hydrochloric acid to break down proteins, combine it with pepsin for further digestion, and regulate how quickly partially digested material moves into the small intestine. That timing, called gastric emptying, determines everything. If gastric emptying is too fast, blood sugar spikes and nutrient absorption suffers. If it's too slow, you feel heavy, uncomfortable, and bloated for hours. The pace needs to be balanced, and that balance is largely controlled by signals from your vagus nerve. When vagal activity is strong before and during a meal, gastric emptying is smoother and more efficient. Studies examining parasympathetic activation, which is essentially vagus nerve activity, consistently show that higher pre-meal vagal tone is associated with less bloating, better insulin response, and more stable blood sugar levels. Here's another detail most people never hear. Cortisol, your stress hormone, can rise after meals if your nervous system is already in a sympathetic fight-or-flight state. That post-meal cortisol promotes fat storage, especially around the abdomen. It also interferes with sleep and increases later cravings. So, if you're eating while stressed and rushed, your body may literally store more of that meal as fat, not because of the food itself, but because of the hormonal environment surrounding it. This is why some people feel like they do everything right during the day, but still struggle with weight gain or evening cravings. It's not a willpower issue. It's a signaling issue. And now we need to bring in another critical piece, your gut microbiome. Your gut contains trillions of microorganisms that influence digestion, immunity, mood, and metabolism. But here's the key. What shapes that microbial environment is not only what you eat, but how effectively your body breaks it down. If stomach acid is low and enzymes are insufficient, which often happens with weak vagal signaling, partially digested food travels further into the intestines than it should. There, it feeds bacteria that thrive on undigested material. This leads to fermentation, gas, bloating, and eventually imbalance. Over time, that imbalance triggers inflammation, which further weakens nerve-gut communication. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing. Weak signal, poor digestion, microbial disruption, inflammation, weaker signal again. Breaking that cycle requires addressing the signal at its source before food arrives. Now let's talk about stress. Your nervous system has two primary modes: sympathetic fight or flight and parasympathetic rest and digest. They function like a seesaw. When one rises, the other falls. Chronic stress, even mild and ongoing, keeps your sympathetic system elevated. That suppresses parasympathetic activity. And when parasympathetic tone drops, your vagus nerve quiets down. A quiet vagus nerve means poor digestive preparation. Think about your own experience. Have you noticed that your digestion is worse on days when you feel rushed or mentally overloaded? That's not coincidence. That's real-time nervous system suppression of digestive function. And on calmer days when you eat slowly and feel relaxed, digestion feels easier. That's stronger vagal activation at work. The problem is, life rarely allows perfect calm before every meal. So instead of waiting for your schedule to change, what you need is a fast, reliable way to shift your nervous system into parasympathetic mode in the 90 seconds before eating. This is where the ritual comes in. There is a logical sequence here, and understanding that sequence matters. If you skip straight to the final step without building the foundation, you weaken the effect. So let's walk through it in order, exactly as it's meant to happen. The first step is deceptively simple. Slow down your first 3 bites. I know that sounds almost too basic, but the speed of your first bites sets the neurological tone for your entire meal. When you take those first few bites quickly, distracted, barely chewing before reaching for the next forkful, your brain receives minimal sensory input. The signal to your digestive system is weak. The cephalic phase response barely activates. Your stomach acid production lags behind. Enzyme release starts late. You end up eating into a digestive system that is still half asleep. But when you slow down your first 3 bites and chew each one deliberately, at least twice as long as you normally would, something shifts. Saliva increases, amylase activity rises. The trigeminal nerve sends a stronger message to your brainstem. The vagus nerve responds. The system turns on before the workload begins. You are no longer chasing digestion. You are leading it. There's also a measurable metabolic impact here. Chewing carbohydrates thoroughly allows salivary amylase to break down more starch in the mouth. That means less undigested carbohydrate hitting your stomach all at once. The result? Lower post-meal blood sugar spikes. For adults over 50, especially those concerned about insulin resistance, afternoon crashes, or creeping abdominal weight gain, this matters more than most people realize. The practical application is straightforward. When you sit down to eat, choose your first 3 bites intentionally. Put your fork down between each one. Chew slowly and fully. Do not lift the fork again until you have swallowed. For those first bites, your phone stays face down. No scrolling, no rushing. It sounds small. But done consistently, this begins retraining your digestive baseline. Now we move to the second step. And this is where neuroscience becomes especially powerful. Step 2 is pre-meal aromatic stimulation. Your sense of smell is unique among your senses. Sight, sound, touch, and taste all pass through a relay station in your brain called the thalamus before reaching conscious awareness. Smell does not. It travels directly to the olfactory bulb, which connects immediately to brain regions that regulate emotion, memory, and most importantly, your autonomic nervous system. That means smell is one of the fastest ways to shift your nervous system state. Aromatic compounds from herbs and spices stimulate nerve endings in your nasal passages and oral cavity. Those signals increase parasympathetic tone. They stimulate saliva production. They enhance stomach acid readiness. They prime bile release from the gallbladder all before you consume a single calorie. This isn't just about flavor. It's neurological preparation. Cultures that regularly use strong aromatic herbs and spices report significantly fewer digestive complaints. That's not accidental. The aromatic intensity is doing real physiological work. Bitter compounds are particularly effective. Substances like dandelion, gentian, and certain traditional bitters activate bitter taste receptors not only on your tongue, but throughout your gastrointestinal tract. When those receptors fire, they stimulate enzyme output, bile flow, and gut motility. For centuries, traditional European medicine included bitter drinks before meals. The science explaining it came much later, but the practice existed because it worked. So the second practical step is simple. Intentionally expose yourself to aroma before eating. Smell your food. Include fresh herbs. Use ginger. Use something naturally aromatic. Allow that sensory stimulation to happen consciously. And now we arrive at the third and most powerful step. One whole clove, placed in your mouth, chewed slowly for 60 to 90 seconds. I know what you're thinking. A clove? Really? It sounds unusual at first. But once you understand the biology, it becomes clear why this works. Cloves contain one of the highest concentrations of a compound called eugenol found in nature. Eugenol is a potent, aromatic molecule with documented effects on the nervous system and digestive preparation when it contacts the tissues of your mouth. Here's what happens. First, eugenol powerfully activates nerve endings in your mouth, gums, and throat. These nerves communicate directly with the brainstem, the very region where vagal control centers are located. The intensity of that stimulation sends a clear, unmistakable message. Something biologically significant is happening. The brain responds by amplifying digestive readiness. Second, eugenol increases saliva production, and not just volume, but quality. The saliva produced under strong oral stimulation contains higher concentrations of amylase and protective proteins. It's thicker, enzyme-rich, and more functionally prepared to initiate digestion. Third, the warming sensation you feel when chewing a clove reflects increased blood flow in the oral tissues. That improved circulation enhances absorption of aromatic compounds into the bloodstream, where they can influence liver enzyme activity and metabolic signaling. And there's a fourth effect that may be the most important of all. You cannot chew a clove while remaining distracted. The sensation is too intense. It forces you into presence. For 60 to 90 seconds, you are aware of warmth, taste, saliva, your jaw moving. That sensory immersion is itself a parasympathetic activator. Research on mindfulness and digestion consistently shows that even brief moments of present moment awareness before eating measurably increase vagal tone and improve digestive outcomes. So when you chew one clove slowly before your largest meal, you are activating nerve pathways to your vagal centers, enriching saliva with digestive enzymes, stimulating bitter receptors that trigger digestive cascades, enhancing circulation, and shifting your nervous system into rest and digest mode, all before the first bite of food. Now let's talk about what actually happens when someone begins practicing this consistently. Not just once, not casually, but daily. Many people notice something the very first time they try it. The meal feels different. There's less urgency while eating. The heaviness that usually follows doesn't land the same way. Instead of feeling stuffed, they feel satisfied. Instead of bloated, they feel steady. Instead of needing something sweet an hour later, they feel done. That's not imagination. And it's not simply expectation bias. It's physiology. When the vagus nerve is activated before a meal, stomach acid production is better timed. Enzymes are released earlier and more efficiently. Gastric emptying, the rate at which food leaves the stomach, becomes more balanced. Blood sugar rises more gradually. Insulin response becomes cleaner. This is where we need to address the placebo question directly, because skepticism is healthy. It's reasonable to ask whether chewing a clove and slowing down before eating simply makes people feel better because they believe it will. But here's what separates this from wishful thinking. The mechanisms involved can be measured. Changes in saliva composition can be analyzed in a lab. Vagal tone can be measured through heart rate variability testing. Gastric secretion rates can be observed. Blood glucose curves can be tracked. And when researchers compare individuals with higher pre-meal parasympathetic activation to those with lower activation, the differences are consistent and repeatable. Higher vagal tone equals more efficient digestion and better metabolic response. This is applied physiology, not folklore, not alternative medicine, just under-discussed biology. Now let's widen the lens. After 50 Metabolism shifts in ways that most people feel but don't fully understand. One of the most important changes is reduced insulin sensitivity. Insulin is the hormone that moves glucose from your bloodstream into your cells after you eat. When insulin sensitivity is strong, that process is smooth. Blood sugar rises, insulin is released, glucose enters cells, and levels return to normal. But over time, influenced by age, stress, sleep disruption, and low-grade inflammation, cells respond less efficiently. The pancreas compensates by releasing more insulin. Blood sugar stays elevated longer. Excess glucose gets stored as fat, especially around the abdomen. That abdominal fat then releases inflammatory signals, which further worsen insulin resistance. It becomes another self-reinforcing cycle. Here's the connection. Strong vagal activation before meals improves insulin response afterward. Difference becomes more noticeable. Bloating episodes decrease. Energy becomes more predictable. By day 30, you have enough personal evidence to decide whether this is temporary or permanent. And here's the key. You are not looking for perfection. You are looking for direction. Because this isn't about dramatic overnight change. It's about retraining your vagus nerve, strengthening your parasympathetic baseline, teaching your body to expect preparation instead of chaos before every meal. Most people after 50 assume decline is inevitable. Slower digestion? That's age. Weight gain? That's age. Cravings? That's age. But often, it's not age, it's signaling. Your system still knows how to function well. It just needs clearer instructions. And in the next part, we're going to talk about one very common evening habit that quietly shuts down all of this progress, even if you've done everything right during the day. Because here's the reality. You can activate your vagus nerve before your largest meal. You can chew slowly. You can regulate your blood sugar more effectively. And then, without realizing it, you can undo much of that nervous system balance in the final hours before sleep. The habit I'm talking about is late-night screen exposure combined with distracted snacking. Almost everyone does it. You finish dinner, you sit down to relax. The television goes on, or you scroll through your phone. The light from the screen stimulates your brain. News headlines, social media, emails, even entertainment keep your nervous system mildly activated. At the same time, you reach for something small. A handful of chips, a piece of chocolate, something crunchy, something sweet. It feels harmless. It feels deserved. But neurologically, this combination is powerful, and not in a good way. Blue light exposure in the evening suppresses melatonin production. Melatonin isn't just a sleep hormone. It also plays a role in regulating insulin sensitivity and nighttime fat metabolism. When melatonin is delayed, cortisol often stays elevated longer than it should. Remember what we discussed earlier, elevated evening cortisol increases cravings and promotes fat storage. Now layer distracted eating on top of that. When you snack in front of a screen, your cephalic phase response is weak. There's little aroma awareness, minimal chewing, almost no conscious presence. Your vagus nerve receives a faint signal. Digestion becomes inefficient. Blood sugar rises quickly. Insulin spikes. And because you're distracted, your satiety signals are delayed. You eat past comfort without noticing until it's too late. Even worse, eating too close to bedtime, especially under sympathetic stimulation from screens, keeps your digestive system active when it should be winding down. Instead of shifting fully into repair mode during sleep, your body is still processing food. Over time, this pattern disrupts cortisol rhythm, impairs overnight fat burning, and worsens insulin resistance. So even if you've done the 90-second ritual earlier in the day, this nightly habit can weaken your overall parasympathetic baseline. Here's the shift. Set a consistent evening cutoff time for screens and snacking, ideally 60 to 90 minutes before bed. If you're hungry, eat intentionally. Sit down, no screen, slow your first bites. Even for a small snack, give your nervous system a clear signal. And then allow your body to power down. This isn't about restriction. It's about protecting the neurological progress you're building during the day. Because your vagus nerve doesn't just influence digestion, it influences sleep quality, heart rate variability, inflammation control, and metabolic resilience. When you train it consistently, and you avoid evening habits that suppress it, you create a reinforcing cycle in the right direction. Stay with me, because now we're going to connect everything. Up to this point, we've talked about the vagus nerve, the cephalic phase response, cortisol, insulin, evening habits, and the 90-second ritual before your largest meal. On the surface, these may seem like separate topics, but they are not separate at all. They are pieces of one integrated system, your nervous system driving your metabolism. And after 50, this connection becomes even more important. Here's the big picture. Your metabolism is not just about calories in and calories out. It's not just about how much you move. It's not even just about what you eat. It's about how your brain interprets your environment and signals your body to respond. Every single day, your nervous system is asking one core question: am I safe? If the answer is yes, your body prioritizes repair, digestion, hormone balance, fat burning, and stable energy. If the answer is no, even mildly no, your body prioritizes protection. And protection means higher cortisol, quicker blood sugar release, more insulin, and greater fat storage. That's the framework everything we've discussed fits into. When you rush into a meal stressed, distracted, or tense, your brain perceives mild threat. Sympathetic activity rises. Cortisol increases. Insulin regulation becomes less efficient. Fat storage becomes more likely. When you pause for 90 seconds, breathe slowly, chew deliberately, and allow your senses to engage, your brain receives a different signal. Safety, predictability, control. The vagus nerve activates. Digestion improves. Insulin response becomes smoother. Blood sugar stabilizes. Now zoom out even further. If you repeat this daily, not perfectly, but consistently, you begin shifting your baseline nervous system tone. Your resting parasympathetic activity increases. Your cortisol rhythm becomes more predictable. Your sleep deepens. Your cravings decrease. This is how small behaviors compound. And this is especially powerful after 50, because hormonal shifts during this stage of life already make insulin sensitivity more fragile. Estrogen and testosterone changes can increase abdominal fat storage. Muscle mass naturally declines if not actively maintained. Stress tolerance often decreases. In this environment, constantly activating your stress response even subtly amplifies metabolic dysfunction, but consistently activating your vagus nerve counteracts it. And here's something most people miss. The body does not respond to intensity as much as it responds to frequency. You do not need extreme diets. You do not need punishing workouts. You need repeated signals of safety. 3 intentional breaths before meals. Slow chewing. Screen boundaries at night. Consistent sleep timing. Brief daylight exposure in the morning. Gentle resistance training. These small inputs tell your brain that the environment is stable, that energy is available, that threat is low. When the brain feels safe, it allows fat to be burned instead of hoarded. Now, let me be clear. This is not magic. It is physiology. It is not instant. It is cumulative. And it requires consistency over weeks and months. But when you understand that your nervous system sits above your hormones influencing them every hour of the day, you stop chasing random strategies and start protecting the system that controls everything else. So, here's the question that naturally comes up at this point. If regulating your nervous system before meals is this powerful, why isn't everyone talking about it? Why do most conversations about weight after 50 focus almost entirely on calories, macros, and exercise plans, while barely mentioning the vagus nerve, parasympathetic tone, or cortisol rhythm? The answer is simple, and it's not a conspiracy. It's because nervous system regulation doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't sell as quickly as a new diet trend. It doesn't require special products. And it doesn't promise overnight transformation. It asks for something much less flashy and much more powerful: awareness and consistency. Modern health culture is built around visible action. Count the steps, track the calories, lift heavier, cut carbs, add supplements. There's nothing inherently wrong with those tools. They can be useful, but they operate downstream. Your nervous system operates upstream. If your baseline stress level is elevated, your body will defend against fat loss, no matter how precise your calorie tracking is. If your cortisol rhythm is disrupted, your insulin response will be less predictable. If your sleep is fragmented, hunger hormones will rise the next day. And if your vagus nerve activity is low, digestion and nutrient absorption become less efficient. You can fight against that physiology, or you can work with it. What makes this approach different is that it doesn't compete with other strategies. It strengthens them. When you activate your parasympathetic system before eating, You make the same meal metabolically easier to process. When you protect your evening wind-down time, you improve overnight hormone regulation. When you reduce chronic sympathetic activation, you improve recovery from exercise. Everything begins to reinforce everything else. But here's another reason this isn't widely emphasized. It requires patience. You won't feel dramatic changes after one slow meal. You won't suddenly drop weight because you breathed for 90 seconds. The shift happens subtly. Your cravings feel slightly more manageable. Your energy dips feel less extreme. Your sleep becomes a little deeper. Your waistline slowly becomes less reactive to stress. And because the changes are gradual, many people overlook the cause. We are conditioned to look for big interventions, yet physiology responds most reliably to repeated small signals. After 50, this matters more than ever. Your body is all. Studies comparing people with higher versus lower pre-meal parasympathetic tone show that those with stronger vagal activity experience lower blood sugar spikes and more efficient insulin signaling, even when eating identical staple meals. So this ritual isn't just about comfort. It's about long-term metabolic direction. If you eat one major meal per day, and every single time your body handles that meal more efficiently, lower glucose spike, cleaner insulin response, less cortisol interference, the cumulative effect over months and years becomes meaningful. Not dramatic overnight, but steady, compounding. And that compounding matters more after 50 than ever before. Now we need to talk about cortisol because if you truly understand this hormone, you'll finally understand why evening cravings can feel so overpowering, even when you've eaten well all day. Cortisol is commonly labeled the stress hormone. That's true, but incomplete. Cortisol is also deeply involved in blood sugar regulation, fat storage, inflammation control, and your sleep-wake rhythm. Under ideal conditions, cortisol follows a predictable daily pattern. It rises in the morning to help you wake up and feel alert. Then it gradually declines throughout the day, reaching its lowest levels at night so your body can rest, repair, and burn fat efficiently during sleep. But chronic low-grade stress, the kind most adults over 50 live with, disrupts that rhythm. When your sympathetic nervous system remains mildly elevated throughout the day, cortisol doesn't taper the way it should. Instead, it lingers. It may spike again in the late afternoon. It may even rise in the evening. And here's where it gets interesting. When cortisol rises in the evening, it directly stimulates appetite, particularly cravings for high-carbohydrate, high-fat foods. This isn't weakness. It's biology. Historically, a rise in cortisol before nightfall signaled the need to replenish energy stores before sleeping. But today, when food is constantly available and we're rarely physically depleted at night, that same mechanism works against us. You feel the pull towards something sweet, something salty, something comforting. You tell yourself you'll resist. Sometimes you do. Often, you don't. And then comes the frustration. But what if the issue isn't discipline? What if it's daytime nervous system signaling? Strong vagal activation earlier in the day improves cortisol regulation. Not instantly, this is not a one-day fix, but over weeks of consistent parasympathetic training, the nervous system recalibrates. Cortisol rhythms stabilize. Evening spikes become less frequent. Around the 3 to 4 week mark, many people report something subtle but powerful. The cravings don't disappear entirely, but they feel quieter, manageable, less urgent. The internal noise drops. This is one of the most meaningful long-term benefits of the ritual, and one that's rarely connected back to digestion. Because digestion isn't isolated. It's tied to your stress response, your hormonal balance, your metabolic direction, and even your sleep quality. Now, before we go further, we need to address the practical side of doing this correctly, because small mistakes can dramatically reduce its effectiveness. The first mistake is rushing. 60 to 90 seconds sounds short, but most people underestimate how long that really is. They chew for 20 seconds and assume they've done enough. But the 60-90 second window isn't random. That duration allows the full neurological cascade to activate. Cutting it short weakens the effect. The second mistake is distraction. If you're chewing a clove while checking emails, watching television, or arguing about something stressful, you're pulling your nervous system back into sympathetic mode. For those 90 seconds, you need presence. Notice the warmth. Notice the saliva. Notice your jaw moving. That awareness is part of the mechanism. The third mistake is inconsistency. This is not a one-time trick. Vagal tone strengthens through repetition. Think of it as nervous system training. 5 to 6 days per week is ideal. The effects build over time. The fourth mistake is overdoing it. 1 clove is the dose. More is not better. Consistency beats intensity here. And a quick safety note. If you have sensitive gums, start with a small portion and build gradually. If you're on blood-thinning medication, consult your physician first, as cloves can have mild anticoagulant effects in higher amounts. For most adults over 50, 1 whole clove before the largest meal is safe and well tolerated. Now step back for a moment and consider something important. Most health advice focuses on content, what you eat. But very little attention is given to context, the state your body is in when you eat it. After 50, context often matters more than content. You can eat the most nutrient-dense meal possible, but if you eat it stressed, rushed, and distracted, your digestive machinery is underpowered. Enzyme output drops. Cortisol rises. Satiety signals weaken. Overeating becomes easier. But if you take 90 seconds to prepare your nervous system first, even an imperfect meal is processed in a more favorable hormonal and digestive environment. The factory is turned on before the delivery arrives. The factory is turned on before the delivery arrives. So if this is grounded in physiology, if the mechanisms are measurable, and if the practice is this simple, why isn't everyone talking about it? The answer is uncomfortable but important. First, there's no commercial incentive behind it. No pharmaceutical company profits from you chewing a clove before dinner. No supplement brand can patent vagal stimulation through aroma and mindful chewing. The health industry tends to amplify what can be packaged, sold, and scaled. A free, home-based, 90-second practice doesn't generate revenue, so it rarely generates headlines. Second, modern medicine is largely reactive. It is designed to diagnose and treat disease once it becomes clinically significant. It is not structured around optimizing systems before they fail. The slow decline in digestive efficiency after 50 doesn't usually trigger a diagnosis. It triggers frustration. You feel off but not sick, uncomfortable but not hospitalized. That gray zone is where preventive nervous system work belongs, but it's not where the medical spotlight shines. Third, this kind of change requires consistency. It doesn't promise transformation in 3 days. It builds over 3 to 4 weeks. And in a culture trained to expect immediate results, gradual neurological recalibration isn't flashy enough to trend. But your body doesn't care about trends. It responds to repetition. If you commit to this for 30 days, 1 clove, 60 to 90 seconds, before your largest meal, you won't need a study to convince you. You'll have your own data. You'll feel the difference in how heavy or light you are after meals. You'll notice whether bloating decreases. You'll observe whether evening cravings soften. You'll see what happens to your energy 2 to 3 hours after eating. You are not just getting older. You are not broken. Your system is undersignaled. After 50, health becomes less about fighting your body and more about communicating with it. Less restriction, more preparation. Less force, more alignment. When you restore the signal, the system adjusts. Because here's the truth. Information only becomes transformation when you apply it consistently. And this ritual only works if you actually do it. So let's make this simple and structured. For the next 30 days before your largest meal of the day, you will do 3 things in sequence. First, sit down, not standing at the counter, not eating in the car, sit. That physical shift alone tells your nervous system that this moment is different. Second, put your phone away, completely, face down and out of reach. Those 90 seconds are not multitasking time. They are nervous system training time. Third, place 1 whole clove in your mouth and chew slowly for 60 to 90 seconds. Do not rush it. Let the warmth build. Notice the saliva. Feel the sensation along your jaw and throat. Stay present with it. When the 60 to 90 seconds are complete, begin your meal and slow down your first 3 bites exactly as we discussed earlier. Put your fork down between each bite. Chew fully. Swallow completely before lifting the utensil again. That's it. No tracking macros, no calorie counting, no elimination lists, just consistent signaling before eating. Now, while you're doing this for 30 days, I want you to pay attention to 4 markers. First, how heavy or light you feel after meals. Not immediately, but about 30 to 60 minutes later. Second, the frequency and intensity of bloating. Is it the same, less, gone on some days? Third, your energy levels 2 to 3 hours after eating. Are you crashing or are you steady? Fourth, your evening cravings. Not whether they disappear overnight, but whether they feel slightly less urgent over time. You don't need an app. You don't need a spreadsheet. Just honest observation. If writing it down helps, do that. If not, simply check in mentally at the end of each day. Here's what most people experience. By day 7 to 10, there's usually a subtle shift. Meals feel calmer. Digestion feels slightly smoother. By day 20, the navigating hormonal transitions. Muscle protein synthesis slows. Recovery takes longer. Insulin sensitivity becomes more variable. In that context, constantly stimulating your stress response is like pushing on an already strained system. Calming it, even briefly, is like removing pressure. That is why the 9-0 second ritual matters. That is why chewing slowly matters. That is why protecting your evening environment matters. Not because they are trendy, but because they align with how your nervous system is designed to function. Now let's bring this down to something practical. No theory, no complex routines, just a clear way to start today. Because information without implementation changes nothing. If you followed this entire discussion, you now understand something most people overlook. Your nervous system is not separate from your metabolism. It directs it. And after 50, when hormonal shifts make your system more sensitive to stress, that direction matters even more. So here's the simple framework. First, choose one meal, ideally your largest meal of the day. Before you take a single bite, pause for 90 seconds. Sit down, both feet on the floor, shoulders relaxed. Inhale slowly through your nose for 4 seconds. Exhale gently for 6. Do that 5 or 6 times. Let your jaw unclench. Let your tongue rest naturally. Then take your first bite and chew more slowly than feels normal. That's it. You are not changing the food. You are changing the signal. Second, protect your final hour before bed. Reduce screen exposure. Dim the lights. If you eat, do it intentionally, without distraction. Allow your body to shift into recovery mode. This supports melatonin, stabilizes cortisol rhythm, and improves overnight insulin sensitivity. Third, add one reinforcing habit during the day. It could be a short walk in natural light. It could be 2 brief strength sessions per week. It could be 5 minutes of quiet breathing mid-afternoon instead of scrolling on your phone. These are not dramatic interventions. They are stabilizing signals. And here is the most important part. Do not try to perfect all of this at once. Your nervous system responds to consistency, not intensity. One meal per day done calmly, repeated over weeks, is more powerful than an entire week of forced discipline followed by burnout. You may not notice dramatic changes immediately. What you'll likely notice first is subtle. Less urgency around food, fewer extreme cravings in the evening, more stable energy between meals, slightly better sleep. These are early signs that your parasympathetic tone is improving. Over time, those small shifts compound. Blood sugar variability decreases. Cortisol rhythm stabilizes. Abdominal fat becomes less resistant. Recovery improves. Your body stops feeling like it's constantly defending itself. This is not a shortcut. It is alignment. And alignment is sustainable. After 50, the goal is not to fight your body harder. It is to work with its design. When your brain feels safe, your hormones cooperate. When your nervous system is regulated, your metabolism becomes more flexible. That is the real leverage point. So here's my invitation to you. Try the 9-0 second ritual for the next 7 days before your largest meal. Protect your evening wind-down time. Observe, don't judge. Pay attention to how your body responds. If this shifted your perspective on weight, metabolism, and stress after 50, make sure you subscribe and stay connected. Share this with someone who keeps saying their body just isn't responding anymore. And in the comments, tell me which habit you're starting with today. Your nervous system is always listening. The question is, what signal will you send next?